When we picture the end of a civilization, we usually imagine a sudden, overwhelming cataclysm, a volcano erupting, a massive earthquake, or a tsunami wiping a thriving city off the map in a matter of hours. But the historical record tells a different story. Severe droughts, devastating storms, and consecutive crop failures are regular, expected events in the lifespan of any society. Healthy, well-organized populations routinely manage these crises and recover. Even hostile invasions rarely succeed on their own. A powerful, organized state can easily repel raiders or conquerors, provided its internal structures are intact. An empire falls to an outside force only when it is already rotting from the inside. The true threat to a society rarely comes from barbarian armies or shifting weather. Instead, the danger lies in the exact mechanisms a society builds to protect itself. From ancient agricultural empires to modern digital supply chains, our drive to invent increasingly complex solutions to our problems eventually becomes the very weight that crushes us. Anthropologist Joseph Tainter observed that human societies function as giant problem-solving organizations. When faced with a challenge, like a growing population or a food shortage, we respond by adding new layers of infrastructure, new technologies, and new bureaucracies. This graph illustrates Tainter's theory of marginal returns. On the vertical axis, we have the benefits to society, and on the horizontal, the level of complexity. Notice how the initial investments in complexity yield massive rewards. Building an irrigation trench or a dirt road requires very little energy, but instantly doubles food production or trade. But as we continue looking at this same chart, the benefit curve flatlines and then plunges into the red. Every subsequent problem requires an exponentially more expensive solution. Eventually, a society reaches a tipping point where it costs more energy, money, and labor just to maintain the existing infrastructure than the system actually produces. The inhabitants of Easter Island solved the logistical challenge of moving massive stone statues and building canoes by cutting down the island's giant palm trees. They maintained their social and religious order, but the cost of that maintenance was the total deforestation of their home. Without trees for new boats or to stop soil erosion, the population starved. The Roman Republic solved its early economic and security challenges through aggressive military expansion. Conquering neighbors paid for itself in plundered wealth, but eventually the cost to garrison, tax, and administer millions of miles of distant territory far exceeded the value those provinces produced. These great civilizations did not collapse due to a sudden string of bad luck. They systematically bankrupted themselves, trying to support the enormous weight of the solutions that had initially made them powerful. Today, our borders are not defined by stone walls or legions of soldiers. We operate a vast, invisible empire of digital infrastructure and tightly coupled global supply chains. To squeeze out more efficiency, we are actively forcing internet connectivity onto legacy operational technology. Hardware that was designed to run in isolation, like municipal water pumps, power grid substations, and industrial manufacturing lines, is now plugged directly into global networks. This diagram shows how that integration creates a sprawling attack surface. A minor software patch meant to improve a single localized process instantly opens thousands of vulnerable entry points across the entire global network. Looking closer at a single node on this network, you can see the secondary costs of this complexity. When highly regulated industries, like life sciences, embed artificial intelligence into their validated systems, it requires compounding layers of governance, security audits, and continuous compliance monitoring just to ensure the AI operates safely. Like an ancient empire struggling to pay its border guards, our relentless push for technological feature expansion is rapidly outpacing our financial and operational ability to actually secure it. This burden of complexity isn't limited to digital networks. In the current geologic epoch, known as the Anthropocene, the sheer scale of our global problem-solving machinery is colliding with hard physical environmental limits. This radar chart maps the 9 planetary boundaries necessary for a stable Earth system. As you can see, our extraction of resources has already forced 6 of these wedges to burst far outside the safe operating zone. Approaching systemic limits does not guarantee an inevitable collapse. Survival depends entirely on how a society chooses to adapt to the pressures it has created. The Norse settlers in Greenland faced a cooling climate and faltering trade routes, yet they rigidly maintained their resource-intensive European agricultural practices, refusing to adapt to the methods of the local Inuit. Because they would not alter their societal structure, they starved. By contrast, the inhabitants of the tiny island of Tacopia have lived sustainably for 3 millennia. When their population began to outstrip their resources, they made the difficult, intentional choice to simplify. They collectively agreed to slaughter every pig on the island, abandoning an inefficient food source to preserve their delicate ecosystem. The ultimate test of a society is not its capacity to continually add layers of technology, administration, and infrastructure. True resilience is the wisdom to recognize when the cost of complexity has grown too high, and the courage to intentionally simplify before the system breaks.